welcome to National Consumer Protection Week. The best way to reach us during the pandemic is by email, and then we will be able to call you back out. Next slide. And that's the email address. There we go. The Office of Consumer Protection has many services that it provides to Montgomery County residents. One, we handle disputes between merchants and consumers so that if you have paid for a good or a service and you're not happy with the results, we can get a complaint in from you. Our investigators will review the facts, look at the law, see if they can help you solve the problem. If in the process of that review, they determine that the law is violated, as a public safety law enforcement agency, which enforces the county's consumer protection laws, we do have the ability to bring enforcement action in connection with that complaint as well. We ordinarily provide consumer specialists by phone or walk-in without an appointment. During the pandemic, an email in is best. We will give you a call back. We also do a lot of outreach and education to the community, whether it's community groups, neighborhood groups, HOAs, business groups, civic associations, and whatnot. If at any point your group is interested in getting a speaker to come to an event, we have a speaker request form on our webpage. Last but not least, we license and regulate certain industries. So if you're getting your car repaired, they should have a registration. If someone's coming into your home to repair your stereo system or entertainment center or your appliances, they should be registered with us. We license secondhand personal property dealers for the police department, new home builders, and tow truck operators as well. Next slide. Next slide, perfect. I wanted to introduce our presenters today. Christy Kelly is a local lawyer who has been a consumer protection lawyer of someone that I have actually reached out to in the past. So I am very happy to have her present. And Ira Reingold is the executive director of the National Association of Consumer Advocates. And if folks are looking for a consumer lawyer, they do have a find an attorney feature, but even better, there are a lot of resources, videos, and research materials on their website that consumers can definitely reach out to. So we have some really amazing presenters today. So without further ado, I turn it over to Ms. Kelly and Mr. Reingold.
Well, thanks, Tracy. It's our pleasure to be here today. As a Montgomery County resident, I'm really glad that we can do this presentation. What our goal here today is to really just give you some basic understanding of how to deal with debt and how to deal and understand your credit report as well. We're living in a time right now of enormous debt buildup, of enormous people in enormous crises because of lack of jobs, because of an eviction threat, because of threat of foreclosure, because people are concerned about paying their utilities. And we're living at a time where we've never seen so many people concerned about debt. And it's a really good opportunity to think about the debt that you have, how to manage it appropriately. And we're happy to walk through some of those things, happy to take any questions people have as we go, but at least begin to give you a basic understanding of when you're in crisis, or if you're getting debt, how you manage that debt in these very, very difficult times. So we'll walk through the slides and talk through it. So a typical situation. Now, again, there's nothing typical about what we've been going through for this last year. It's almost a year now. People are really living in a financially insecure time. I know they've talked about sort of this K recovery, but a lot of people are on the bottom part of that K. People are really frightened, have lost jobs, do not have the financial resources to pay their mortgages, to pay their housing, pay their utilities, put food on their kids' table. So we are living in a time of incredible financial insecurity. And the question is, how do you deal with that? People have less income, more expenses. Lots of bills keep building up. And when we live in that time, one of the great lessons, or I've been a consumer advocate for a long time, one of the things that we always talk about is the scam artists and the bad guys understand desperation. When people are in trouble, that's when the bad guys come out. Yeah, anytime you see an FTC presentation, anytime you hear from a consumer attorney, you recognize that when people are at their most vulnerable is when the bad guys show up. It's a consistent thing. We see it all the time. And now is a prime opportunity where scam artists, where aggressive debt collectors, people offering bad credit are out there reaching out for you. We know that happens for seniors all the time. We're getting calls all the time, well, they're offering them things that are too good to be true. One of the lessons, again, is when somebody offers you something that seems to be too good to be true, it is too good to be true. When they offer you a loan to get you out of trouble, that usually is just putting off today. It's putting off till tomorrow your problems of today. And the loan costs are usually far more than you can imagine. So you need to be very careful when people are offering you things. Same thing with debt collectors. One of the things happens when people have a lot of debt and you can't get blood from a rock is what debt collectors do. They're all fighting for each other, right? They're all trying to get a small share of your money. So they will be more aggressive in terms of attempting to get your money. And usually the people who are most aggressive are the ones who have the least likely claim on your income. So you need to be very aware that if you're falling behind, or folks who fall behind, people who fall behind in debt, know they'll be hearing for debt collectors. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you deal with debt collectors and things that you need to do to not get yourself in trouble. And again, and the other thing people always worry about, and the place where you can run into trouble. And I have this conversation with neighbors, with friends, with clients who come to us. People are always concerned about, oh my God, this is going to hurt my credit. I've got all this debt. What's it going to do to my credit report? And we're going to talk about that and what a credit report really means. I know I've had many conversations over the years. And like I said, I've done this for a long time, where people will come to me and maybe the best solution for them may in fact be bankruptcy. And when we talk about bankruptcy, the reaction is, oh my God, that's going to destroy my credit. And typically, if you're even contemplating bankruptcy because your financial situation is so dire that you need to do bankruptcy, and bankruptcy is a good tool for some people. When that situation is that dire, your credit report is in trouble anyway, and bankruptcy may give you a chance to actually rebuild your credit. So you need to be very careful in thinking about how you're going to deal with a situation that a lot of people are in, right? How do you deal? How to help? How do you manage? How do you help your friends? How do you help your relatives? How do you help yourself when you're in a situation where you have simply too much debt and not enough income? A situation that we have a lot of people unfortunately dealing with today. So how to become economically independent and secure? Well, right now that's trouble because obviously people are not having income. Hopefully the government will pass the bill that they're considering, which will put some more money into people's pockets, will give more rental assistance, more utility assistance. But until that time, even if you've lost your income for a couple of months, you may be behind. So how do you figure out how to make yourself economically independent and secure? How are you going to manage that, right? Minimizing debt. Be very wary about taking more debt than you need, right? I understand the need when you have to put food on your table or pay bills to try to use your credit card. But you're just putting off today. You're putting off till tomorrow what you owe today. Be very careful about adding any additional debt to your being. And that means your credit card should not be something that you use liberally. Be very, very careful because that's money you're going to have to pay off. Budgeting. Again, think carefully about what you absolutely need. We're going to talk a little bit about debts that you need to pay and debts that you don't always need to pay and how you manage that, right? Avoid debts that you need not be responsible for. This is a message that I've repeated many, many times to senior citizens along the way. Oftentimes there are relatives who want you to co-sign on a car, on a house, on a different type of loan. Be very, very careful about signing onto a loan that is not your personal responsibility. Well, I just need you to be the guarantor. Well, a guarantor means you may be legally liable, and when the person who has the debt doesn't pay it, you're going to owe it yourself. So you need to be really thoughtful and careful before you agree to back up anybody's debt or co-sign on a loan, because ultimately you will be responsible for that debt. And you need to be very, very careful and very thoughtful about that. And then avoiding scams and predatory lenders. We can do days on the type of scams you may see and the type of predators that are out there, particularly when people are desperate. And I don't think I've seen a more desperate time. Well, I guess maybe since the last economic crisis that we're seeing today. So desperation leads to scam artists, leads to predatory lenders. Be very wary. Again, be careful who you're talking to. Do research about somebody who offers you money. Do research when someone presents a quick scheme, or somebody who offers you money in a way that doesn't make sense to you. So use some common sense. And again, when something looks too good to be true, should be your motto. If it looks too good to be true, it is too good to be true. When people are offering you things that don't make financial sense in your mind, run away. When people are randomly calling you and making offers to you, move quickly and get out of there, because in fact, they are taking advantage of you. Okay, so now we're living in a situation where people have lots of debt. And we'll walk through how you manage your debt. It's really, really important to think about how you manage your debt and what you really need to get through the day, what you really need to take care of your family, to take care of yourself. So how do you prioritize that? And this is something that should be intuitive. It's not intuitive for everybody, because oftentimes you simply react to the person who is bothering you the most, right? When during this last year, as people have lost soft sources of income, where jobs have failed, you've obviously built up debts, right? Your credit card bill may be particularly high. You may have missed a rental payment. You may have missed a mortgage payment. You may not be able to pay your utilities. Your car payment may be behind. So you need to really think about the consequences of the bills that you need to pay. What bills are important to pay? What bills are less important to pay? Know that that doesn't always make sense, or it may not make sense to you initially, but think about the consequences of not paying the debt, and that helps you determine whether or not that debt should be paid, right? So again, when you're in financial difficulty, the debt collectors will come out in force. The worst debt collectors are the ones who are going to harass you the most, right? Typically, the one who has the least claim on your money, the least ability to get at your income or your wages or your bank account, are the ones who are going to be the most abusive, most harassing, the most frequent. And I know, for a lot of human beings, it's like, I just want this person to go away. Let me give them a few dollars. They'll stop calling me. That is the last thing you ever wanted. Never, ever do that. There are ways to get rid of debt collectors. That's not the way, to just give them a few dollars. They won't go away. They'll keep coming after you. And again, so don't let their credit harassment determine what order you pay your bills. It's really important to think that way. Just peace of mind from somebody not calling you is not a good enough reason. And there are laws to protect you from debt collectors that are harassing you. Okay. So what do you do about your debt? Again, think about what you need to get through the month, to take care of yourself and your family. So how do you prioritize debt? Obviously, you need to put food on your table, right? So food is important. Shelter, if you have the ability to pay, think about it almost as a pyramid. Make sure you have food for your family. Make sure you pay your rent and your mortgage. Again, if you can. People may come and have lots of credit card debt, and they may owe a mortgage, and they may have a debt collector coming after them for something else. Always prioritize paying your rent and paying your mortgage. Because if you don't pay your rent or you don't pay your mortgage, there's a chance you will wind up homeless and lose the place that you're living in. And we'll talk a little bit as we go through here, what opportunities you have to pay your rent and pay your mortgage. And there are protections in place right now. There are moratoriums. They're not perfect moratoriums. There are things that you can do proactively to make sure your rent and your mortgage get paid or get delayed. But it is essential to think through. Not paying your rent and not paying your mortgage can lead to disaster. Not paying your credit card bill simply means an increase of debt, and there are ways of dealing with that, right? Your car, transportation expenses, your car, the ability to travel, right? If you're working and you have a car and you need a car for your job, it's really important you make those car payments. Again, not always possible, but this is the way you need to prioritize, sort of walk through a list. And obviously child support is something that if you owe, you need to pay. That's how you think, that's how you need to be thinking about debt. Other priority debts may be your taxes, student loans, court fines, and traffic tickets. And again, those are debts that if you don't pay, the government or the end, you can't just, there are ways of dismissing that debt or negotiating that debt down or even dealing with debt in bankruptcy. Some of those debts don't go away, like taxes or student loans in bankruptcy. Other debts can go away, and there are ways of negotiating them way down. Those are debts that are harder to deal with. But again, think about the debts that are secure, that we call them secure debts. You don't pay a mortgage, they can take your house away. You don't pay your car payment, they can take your car away. You don't pay, rent is not really secure debt, but if you don't pay your rent, you can lose your place. So those are the things that you really need to be thinking about. Low priority debts, can't say this enough. Unsecured, it's called unsecured debt, right? Credit cards. If you made a list of things that you need to pay and you're in debt, probably the best bet is to cut up your credit card. One thing that I hear from people often is, well, what if I just make the minimum payment so I'll get them off my back? Again, if you take a look, years ago, back when Dodd-Frank was passed, one of the things that, and there was a credit card act that was part of it, there should be something on your credit card shows, and if you make the minimum payment, it will show you how long it will take you to pay that debt off. It's a long time. And making a minimal payment is basically just throwing good money after bad. If you have the financial capability with your credit cards, it's always a good thing to pay them off in full. If you don't pay them off in full, that debt will accumulate quickly because it's usually a much higher interest rate than any other source of credit that you'll have. But also, it's really important not to just make a minimal payment, because really what you'll see, and I don't recommend trying this, but if you make minimal payments, your next credit card bill, even if you don't buy anything else, is going to be higher than the last one. So it's a constant. So it makes no sense to just pay a little bit towards your credit card, because it's not going to go away. It's just going to keep building up. And there are ways of dealing with credit cards, like negotiating settlements or dealing with them in other contexts. But that is not a priority bill. Your priority has got to be your house, your car, your family's food, the needs that you have. Now, attorney's fees, as an attorney, obviously, what's an attorney going to do if you don't pay them? Now, you should pay them, obviously, and doctor's bills you want to pay, although doctor bills are another category because they don't make a lot of sense, right? So you're thinking about those are debts that if you don't pay, they get reported on your credit report. It may feel really bad because you have this debt out there, but the consequences are far minimal, right? Credit card, your credit rating may be affected. Ultimately, you might get a judgment against you, but that's a long process to get to. And garnishment is a possibility, and we can talk through that as well. Garnishment is the end result, but that will take time, and you'll have opportunities to protect yourself. But when it comes to those type of debts, that's the worst consequence, right? Your credit rating goes bad. Down the road, they may seek a court action against you, and down the road, they may attempt to garnish your wages, your bank account. But there are ways to protect yourself from that. If you don't pay your rent or your mortgage, not only will your credit rating be really damaged, and you may have a judgment against you, which will make it even harder for rent or to get a mortgage again, but it will lead to a loss of a home. So again, think about the consequences, prioritize your debt. Secure debts are most important, then you work your way down to unsecured debt. In debt, okay, know who you owe. Now we're going to talk a little about the protections that exist both in Maryland and federally. So one of the things that you'll find over time, particularly when you fall in debt, is that you may have debt collectors come after you. And oftentimes we see consumers who have a debt collector come after them have no idea who that debt collector is. They may get a note, they may see this name, and they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. Who is this person? What is this debt? So understanding who you owe makes a big difference because it makes a determination about how you deal with them, right? So an original creditor would be the credit card company or the doctor's office or the car, the lender that you have. That's an original creditor. and you deal with them directly. But at some point, when you fall behind in debt, what the creditor will do is they will either assign that, what they will do is they'll assign the debt to a third party to collect the debt, or sometimes they just simply sell the debt to a debt buyer. There's a whole big industry out there across this country called the debt buying industry. And these are folks whose entire business is buying debt and collecting, buying debt pennies on the dollar, and then collecting it for the full amount plus all the extra fees that they get to add. So understanding who the person is who's collecting from you is really important. One, to understand what you may actually owe them. Two, understand what the debt is. Three, understand what kind of consumer protections you have, right? So the major law that protects consumers is something called the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act, or the FDCPA. That only applies to third-party debt collectors. So theoretically, an original creditor can harass you, can abuse you, can do all sorts of things in violation of the FDCPA, but that's not a violation of federal law. Now, Maryland law applies to original creditors, so theoretically you might have a claim against them if an original creditor is doing sorts of abusive behavior to collect their debt. But an original creditor under federal law cannot be held accountable. Debt collectors, on the other hand, absolutely can. And an assignee and a debt buyer, they absolutely can be held accountable under the federal law, but it's also really important to understand that when a debt buyer buys your debt, they're not just buying Joe Smith's debt over here, but they're buying streams and streams and streams of data, thousands of points of data of people's information. And that's about all they have. They have very limited information. So oftentimes when a debt buyer brings a case or says they owe you money, that you owe money, oftentimes they make mistakes. And oftentimes they don't have an accurate accounting of what the money that you owe is. These are times, particularly when there's a lawsuit brought against you, and often they'll be brought by a debt buyer. Very rarely will they be brought by an original creditor. Is a time you really want to seek legal help, because there are remedies for you, and there are ways that attorneys can help you that you otherwise might not be able to get help. So some of the debt collections we talked about, right? Let me just pull back for a second on debt collection issues and lawsuits and things that are brought. Excellent. Let me catch my breath. So debt collection issues. So understanding who the person collecting the debt becomes very important. And if in fact a case is brought against you, if a debt collector is coming after you, it's really important, if you can, to get an attorney. Now one question people always have, and I think it's really important to understand, is that I'm in debt, I can't pay my bills, how can I possibly afford an attorney? Right? So there are two responses to that. One, in Maryland, we have Maryland legal aid. If your income is low enough, they can represent you. And they often, most legal aid programs, and I'm sure Maryland legal aid does this as well, they will do debt defense, which means they basically represent you to defend a debt that you don't owe. Now, obviously, you're going to need to show that you don't owe that debt. The amount that they're asking for is incorrect, but legal aid programs will do debt defense work. Debt defense work. Secondly, and this is really a fundamental thing that I think every consumer needs to understand, we actually just did a national survey of consumers to see whether or not they understood what their rights were under consumer protection statutes. And when we helped draft those statutes and redraft those statutes over the last 30 to 40 years, one of the things that almost every federal statute and state statute has is something called a fee shifting statute. So cases that when you go to an attorney and they determine there's a violation of federal law or state consumer protection law, there will be a part of that statute that allows for what we call fee shifting. So a client, a consumer who doesn't have any money, who is in debt, and they're saying, wait, I can't afford an attorney. The fact is that people who specialize in consumer protection attorneys typically don't charge. They will evaluate your case to determine whether or not you have a good claim. And then if they can win your case, if they can defend your case, if they can find a federal violation of law and then settle your case or actually win it in trial, they will get paid under the fee shifting statute by the defendant. So it's really important to understand that these are the type of cases that we understand that you don't have much money. You can't afford to pay for an attorney. So the federal law protects you by trying to provide you with a private right of action, a private right to enforce the law, and that's why these fee shifting statutes exist. And one of the things that's always surprised me is consumers don't know that. When we fight to create consumer protection laws, there are ways of enforcing the laws. Federal enforcement, you can contact the CFPB, you can contact the FTC, you can contact state enforcement agencies like the AG, you can contact Montgomery County Office of Consumer Protection, or you can actually take action by yourself and actually can afford an attorney, because we believe that the only way all of these laws can be enforced is if there's both private enforcement and public enforcement. So it's very important for consumers to understand that when they have a debt collection matter after them and they say, well, I can't get an attorney because I can't afford an attorney. One, legal aid won't charge you if you're income eligible, but private attorneys won't charge you either if in fact you have a good case, which an attorney can evaluate and then see that and then bring a case and try to collect their fees from the defendant in that case, or the debt collector in that case. Okay. So debt collection issues, understand whether it's an original creditor, whether it's a third party debt collector. We can determine whether or not there are FDCPA claims in their actions. They send a letter that violates the FDCPA. Have they called you at hours outside of what the FDCPA allows them to do? Have they called you too many times? Have they used language that's abusive? Those are all FDCPA violations, and those are all kind of cases where a consumer attorney can help you, both not only stop the debt collection, but theoretically bring a case against the debt collector as well. Again, talked about that. What is happening? Are you getting letters and phone calls? Are you getting collection letters? And ultimately, are you going to get a suit for a deficiency? And what that means in English is that they are suing you because you owe money. There's a debt that you owe. Debt collection. When you get that collection. Now, I talked about this a bunch, but it's really important, particularly if you get court papers. Now, I was an attorney for many years representing individuals. I don't represent individuals anymore. But when consumers would come see me, it was sort of a running joke in my office. When people would come in, they would have all of their papers in envelopes that they never opened up. And their court papers they wouldn't look at. They would ignore it. Well, I knew that I have a debt, so I don't need to open this up. Well, if in fact you get a notice to go to court, it is really important not to ignore it. It's really important to figure out what's going on, who the debt collector is, and it's really important to see if you can find an attorney who can help you. Again, legal aid is an option. Our website, the National Association of Consumer Advocates, has a list of attorneys in our area who represent consumers who have a debt collection case. So it's really important to see if you can get legal help, because if you ignore the court case, if you don't go to court, I can assure you a judgment will be entered against you. And if you go to court by yourself, the debt collector will attempt to negotiate with you, but oftentimes that negotiation is not particularly fair. And oftentimes, if it's a third-party debt collector, they have no proof that you actually owe the debt. So having somebody represent you, having somebody who can talk on your behalf, may in fact will help you wipe away that debt. It's really important. Again, not to just negotiate with a debt collector, not negotiate just with a debt collection attorney. And this is an important point on the bottom. What we have seen over the last number of years that debt collectors are very good at is there's a statute of limitations. So that you may have some old debts that are 3 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old. All these debt collectors and debt buyers who buy loans, they don't really care. They've got these, like I said earlier, the ones who have the least legal claim on your money are the ones who are going to be the most aggressive. Well, in this instance, what they also understand is if they can get you to pay a little bit, that would revive the statute of limitations. So if a debt that they did not have a legal right to collect on, a legal right to take you to court to collect on, if you make a payment, that theoretically can revive the debt, that becomes a legal debt. And if you don't make payments on that, they can come after you again. Again, not a really great thing to do. So don't be making payments just to get them off your back. Be careful if you make payments in a court case, particularly if you don't know who the debtor is, who the creditor is, and you don't think the amount that they're claiming is correct. Those are really important things to think about. Again, debt collection. So what we did is we talked about the debt. We talked about what happens when you get collected. Then what happens if, in fact, a judgment is entered against you? What do we deal with that? So first thing to understand many low-income consumers are collection proof. And in English, what that means is they can't get at your assets, you can't get at your income, right? That means your income and assets are protected from the reach of creditors. They can't get at child support income. They can't get at disability income. They can't get at unemployment income. So if those are your sources of income, or your income is so low that it's not, it's below the Maryland garnishment limit, then they can't get at you. So even if you get a judgment against you, you need to understand that they may not be able to get any money from you. Again, another reason not to pay them is if in fact you don't have money. You can't get blood from a rock. And if you don't have that money, you need to be very thoughtful about it and understand your financial position. If in fact you're a senior citizen, you don't have a lot of savings, your only source of income is Social Security and maybe a small pension, you may be safe even if they get a judgment against you because they can't get money from you. So it's important that you know how to protect those assets. I just want to make one other point, and then I'm going to turn it over to Christy. We talked earlier about debts and prioritizing debts. We live in a place, thankfully, it's not as cold. I'm from Chicago, spent many years ago. I was really cold, and utility shutoffs were really a problem. Although these past few weeks here in Maryland, it's been pretty cold too, and the summer gets pretty hot. Prioritizing debt. Again, we talked about food, we talked about shelter, we talked about transportation, also about utilities. The one thing you need to know about utilities is there are options out there for you, particularly if you're low income. You do not want to live in a place where your heat is shut off, your electricity is shut off. And there are programs that are available to you. You can find them on the web. You can find them at Montgomery County's website. You can find them at the state of Maryland's website. But there are programs that will provide you with home heating assistance if you can't pay for your home heating. There are programs that will help you retire your arrearage for those utilities. There are programs that will allow you to spread your payments over utility over a period of time, so that in winter, when your gas bill goes really high, you can't afford to pay it. In summer, when it's really low, you might be able to manage it. Same thing with electricity. And then there's weatherization assistance, which is really important for homeowners to understand, theoretically renters too. But your bills may be too high simply because your house is getting old and you can't afford for repairs. Well, there's money available for consumers who need to weatherize their house, whether it's windows, whether it's a furnace, whether it's taking care of your door. There are programs available to you. So again, when it comes to utilities, while it's important to make sure payments are made, it may not be a top priority to pay them first because there are options available to you to help you pay those utilities. Just like there may be opportunities to work with a mortgage servicer to pay your mortgage, less opportunity for rent, although there is rental assistance out there. So again, if you're falling behind on a debt that you can't afford to pay, like your mortgage, you should definitely work with your mortgage company. There's currently a federal moratorium on mortgages. There are programs available to help you with mortgage servicing. On rent, theoretically, there's a moratorium in Maryland, although you'll have to prove that you can't pay your rent because of COVID-19. And again, utilities, if you can't make those payments, there are programs available to you. So not only when you prioritize debt and make debt payments, you need to think about what's most important to keep you and your family safe. You also need to think about where there is assistance available. So there's mortgage assistance, there's utility assistance. And hopefully, again, when we pass the president's bill, there'll be more financial aid available for consumers as well. There's a big pocket of money for rental assistance and utility assistance and other types of assistance as part of that bill that's being considered by Congress as we speak. Okay. Christy, did you want to take, are you going to take over here?
Sure.
Okay.
So thanks, Ira. Thanks for going through all about all the debt collection and prioritizing debt. I'm going to focus on talking about credit reporting and predatory lending scams. I'm a private lawyer and I specialize in credit reporting cases and predatory lending. So it's something, unfortunately, that's very, very common. Predatory lenders are everywhere and they're only becoming more creative. As Ira mentioned earlier, when times are tough, they use people's distress and urgency to prey on them, oftentimes lending $300 and you don't understand the terms, and then all of a sudden you have to pay them back $3,000. And so it's really important that if you have some sort of loan that you feel the terms may be unfair or high cost, to talk to a lawyer or to reach out to Consumer Affairs. Maryland has some of the best consumer protection laws for lending and licensing laws. And so it is just really important to make sure that you reach out and seek assistance, because you shouldn't be using all your resources to pay high interest when you could use it to feed your family or pay other debts that are legitimate. And examples of predatory loans could be payday loans, car title loans, certain check cashing loans, refund anticipation loans. There's a lot of online loans, that can be, using Native American tribes as a front to try to avoid state lending laws. But they prey on people who need quick money. So anytime if you Google fast cash or something like that, what pops up is usually a list of predatory lenders. So it's important to understand that even if you do take out a loan and you did sign a contract, it may be unenforceable in Maryland, and you may have rights that allow you to stop paying the debt, not be obligated on the debt, and maybe even get money because you were the victim of predatory lending. And so if you do have those questions, again, you should contact Maryland Consumer Affairs or a private lawyer who can help you and review your documents. The next part of the presentation is about credit reporting. Everyone's concerned about their credit report because it dictates, whether you will be eligible for an apartment, a mortgage, credit cards, an auto loan, pretty much anything employment, anything you need, your credit is used to determine your eligibility for different services. And so that's why there's a lot of agencies called credit repair organizations. And there really is no such thing as credit repair. I can't stress that enough. You can't fix your credit. Your credit must be accurate, but you can't fix credit and repair it. These companies are generally scams. They charge you money and send letters that really don't do anything, and sometimes they can hurt your credit more because they cause items on your report to re-age. And so there's really no such thing as credit repair. It's really about understanding what is on your credit report, making sure nothing is inaccurate, and preventing new delinquencies so that you can improve your credit moving forward. And so the first thing you want to do is understand what is on your credit report. And if you go to the next slide, Ira, there's a website called www.annualcreditreport.com. And from there, you can get your credit report from each of the credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion for free. And during COVID, you can get it for free on a weekly basis. And so this will tell you everything that's in your credit file with the big three credit bureaus. And so what you want to do is you want to obtain your report from here. There are a lot of other sites and products and monitoring systems that sell your credit, but it doesn't always have the full file or the full picture. So that's why I can't stress enough how important it is to go to annualcreditreport.com to obtain a copy of your report. It's free. It does not impact your score at all because it doesn't show as an inquiry. And so if you're going to obtain a copy of your report, you should really do it from annualcreditreport.com. And so when you get your report, what do? You want to make sure, is this your report? Are these your debts? Is there anything on here that's inaccurate? And so their credit reports are ripe with errors. I think like 3 like 3 out of 10 people have significant errors on their credit reports. And there are a larger number who have more minor errors, but it's really important to obtain a copy of your report so you can determine and make sure that everything is accurate in your report. And so first, you want to understand the terminology. And so you have the credit bureaus. They're the Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. They're the big 3. They're generally, if you're going to apply for credit, what your credit card company would use to determine your eligibility for credit. And furnishers would be your credit card company, your mortgage company, any person to whom you might have credit with who reports information in your credit on your credit report. There's a broader category of consumer reporting agencies, and those can include employment background check companies, rental screening companies, check cashing consumer reporting agencies. A lot of them also will pull from the credit bureaus as well. So, but it's important to understand who you might be dealing with. So say, you had applied for a job and you didn't get a job because there's some criminal record on there that doesn't belong to you. Well, you would want to look to what consumer reporting agency pulled your report and then obtain a copy so you can determine what is inaccurate on your report and correct it. Common problems that occur in credit reports. A mixed file, that is when someone else's information is on your credit report. So maybe, your name is John Smith and another John Smith's mortgage is on your report, or maybe his bankruptcy is on your credit report, or maybe you're applying for a job and John Smith is a sex offender and you're being falsely called a sex offender and you're unable to get employment because another John Smith information is reporting on your file. Another really common thing is identity theft. If someone obtains an account in your name without your knowledge or permission, that will appear on your credit report. It's much more difficult to remove identity theft accounts. Debt collectors can often report on your credit report. A lot of times they don't have as much information about a consumer, so they may not have a social security number, they may just have a name and an address, so they may not be reporting on the correct consumer's report. Oftentimes, if you're not the obligor on account, you're just an authorized user, you can get those accounts removed from your report because you did not sign and agree to be bound and liable for the credit as well. So those are common errors that occur on credit reports, and the Fair Credit Reporting Act allows you to correct these errors and obtain monetary compensation if you are the victim of these errors. And so how to best enforce your rights under the Fair Credit Reporting Act? You first, as I said before, you want to get a copy of your file from whatever credit reporting agency or credit bureau was used in the credit decision or employment decision. And then you understand what's in the file. If there's something inaccurate in your file, you want to dispute it to the credit reporting agencies or the credit bureaus. You want to put your dispute in writing. There are so many ways now online to dispute, but it only gives you a certain number of characters. Sometimes you can't attach documents. Sometimes they won't process it unless they have additional identification information. And so I always recommend you put your dispute in writing, be as detailed as you can, and make sure you send your dispute by certified mail return receipt. If you dispute and the error is not corrected, you would be entitled to monetary damages for failing to correct an error. In some cases, if your file is mixed with someone else's file, you don't even have to do a dispute, because just the fact that they mixed your file with someone else's would entitle you to damages if you were denied credit or employment or housing. If you are the victim of identity theft and you want to prevent further access of your credit, you can submit a fraud alert, or you could even freeze your credit. And this is available through the credit bureaus. Some common problems that you will see that lead to the errors are mixed files often occur with someone with a similar name, similar address, father and son, mother, daughter. My husband's name, Matt Kelly. He's, been called by debt collectors for debts that aren't his because some other Matt Kelly owes money. And he's had stuff on his reports that don't belong to him as well. So it's unfortunately pretty common to have happen. Public records, civil judgments, or criminal records are more common to be inaccurate because they usually don't have a social security number associated with them or full dates of birth, and so they just rely on name and address usually. And so it's not uncommon to have inaccurate criminal record or public record information appear in your credit report. There's often instances where debt collectors or other entities obtain your credit report without your permission, and that would not be allowed as well. So it's just really important to understand what kind of issues you may be able to seek redress from, because you could recover significant monetary damages if there is an error in your credit report. And if that's the case, you're welcome to give me or Ira a call anytime, and we'd be happy to assist you and see what we can do to help. So thank you very much.
All right, if folks have any questions for the presenters, or if you have any questions for OCP, now would be a good time. I have one question that's come in. It says, I have some inquiries that shouldn't be on my report. How do I fix that?
Sure. If you have a copy of your report and it shows the inquiries, you can dispute the inquiries to the credit bureaus. Sometimes they won't investigate those, but that in and of itself will give you a claim under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. It's also possible that the inquiry could be a promotional inquiry or a pre-screened offer of credit. And so it may be that it's not something you applied for, but it would be permissible to be on your report if it's a company that was going to make you an offer of credit and it was a marketing pull essentially. So if you have questions, I'm happy to talk to you about that more specifically. But if they are in fact unauthorized inquiries, you could potentially already have a claim, but if you dispute it to the credit bureaus and they do not correct it, then you would have an even stronger claim.
Any other questions? If not, this slide shows where you can, it wants to know your contact information. Ira, if you could go back one slide. There we go. Okay, if we could go forward one slide, terrific. For folks,
my contact information was incorrect. That was my old law firm on there.
Why don't we put it in the chat box then?
Sure, I'll just send a chat of my current contact.
Perfect. For folks who are on, I want to let you know that our social media handles are here on the slide. We provide at least 2 consumer alerts, whether they're fraud alerts, scam alerts, or just consumer education every day. So you definitely want to be able to follow us. If you go to our YouTube channel, This recording will be up in our webinar playlist, as well as other webinars that deal with this and many other topics. So if you do have the interest in reviewing this program or other programs that OCP has provided, go to our YouTube channel, Consumer Wise, and go to the playlist for webinars. If you have any questions for the presenters or for us, our contact information is here. If you email us, I'm happy to forward it to the presenters as well. And so unless there are any other questions, I think that was it. Yes, so that's it for the questions. And we really thank Ms. Kelly and Mr. Reingold for their time today. This was an amazing program. Thank you very much. And we will end this program. Thank you.